All right, so I'd like to announce the next speaker, which is Michael Upstone with the subject of megaculture this time.
Thank you, Casper. Okay, so we're starting again with another quote. Great quote. Over time, you get a higher and higher yield with less and less input. So let's just move straight into the presentation. Why megaculture? Well, what I'm interested in is which gardening and food growing techniques produce the best quality, the highest yields, and the most reliability all year round. So what I'm going to cover is various technologies to support excellent plant growth and nutrition, organic, permaculture, electroculture, aquaponics, magnetism, light, sound, and rock minerals, and ormus. So let's move on. So the aim is to show some examples of how we can produce very high quality crops with resilience to frost, drought, and most pests, and explain some basic techniques and results. So along the way, we'll consider some technologies for a next generation approach to food production and explain the benefits and some of the limits of applications. And my aim is not to be the expert in all areas at all. It's just to stimulate your interest in your research, because some quite amazing possibilities are here to be able to produce things. So there we go. There's the motivation. Various aspects of the motivation. I like great tasting food. I like fresh food, and even if we buy organic at the supermarket, typically it's 4 or 5 days old. It's not fresh. The enzymes are depleted. It doesn't taste as good. I'm also interested in efficiency and effectiveness. So quality, nutrition, self-sustainability, that also comes into it. I want to be self-supporting if possible. So all of these things come into why I'm interested in this area. And here's another aspect to the motivation. Some people, the convinced diggers, if you like, when you go into communities, they give you this vision of what they value and what they want is you digging in the fields all day, every day. And that has absolutely zero impact upon me apart from repellence. I'd be more interested in eating a slug than going out and digging ground all day and weeding and breaking my back over what I'm doing. And this kind of black and white vision is the thing that I see when I hear them talk about things like that. That's not for me because my time's limited and I want to spend it very productively. So permaculture is an influence, and this is the first place that we're going to start. So we've got Bill Mollison and David Holmgren in the 1970s dealing with Australian desertification issues. It's being dealt with today by people like Dan Winters, who is using biochar, charcoal, rock minerals, compost, and energised imploded water to bloom the desert, literally in weeks. Sepp Holzer, closer to home here in Austria, is a phenomenal character. My goodness, has he got an observation of nature, and does he create amazing ways of looking at it. So he's got a number of presentations on YouTube, well worth a look. Permaculture, what does it do? It works with nature, it works with the land. It doesn't fight it. So unlike agriculture, which ploughs up the land, turns over the soil, then the sun comes out and it dries it, and then the wind comes along and it blows away all the finest minerals, and then it rains and that washes away all the finest minerals and the organic matter. That damages the soil. It creates an addictive relationship where we've got to add more and more fertilizer, more and more pesticides, and what we've got typically in most places is depleted minerals in the soil. So we're working constantly to fight against nature, and I'm interested in the techniques that work with it to support what we're doing. So Sepp Holzer, there's a number of videos on YouTube, fabulous guy. I recommend having a look at them, and he's also got a terrific book which I'm going through at the moment. Briefly, permaculture combines 3 key aspects: an ethical framework. It's about ethics. It's about an understanding of how nature works, and it's a design approach. So this is about the ethics of what is good for the planet, what is good for the land, what is good for the wildlife, and what is good for the people. So here's our permaculture plot. Now, this is not Sepp Holzer-style permaculture, but it is applying a permaculture technique in a given area. And that was established, it was created in June of last year, and this is this year going at full tilt in the garden. That's an 80 square metre plot, and you see some wooden boards around the outside, and there's a reason for that. So the technique that I decided to use was from Back to Eden film, the quote from Paul Gauci back at the start of the presentation. And the technique is very, very simple, and I like simple and I like fairly easy to do. So the technique is cut down the grass, cut down the weeds, put down 3 or 4 sheets of newspaper on top of that, cover that with about 2 inches or 5 centimetres of compost, then put about 4 inches or 10 centimetres of wood chips on top, and then put about another 2 inches or 5 centimetres of compost on top of that, and then get going. Our mistake, it wasn't really a mistake because we got great results in the first year, but it's not ideal to do this in spring. If we'd done it before winter, the wood chips would have decomposed a lot more, and we'd have had an even better condition to start growing the crops on straight away. But nevertheless, it worked, and it worked well. So how does it work? The compost and the wood chips decompose, and when it rains, the compost on top creates compost tea, and it starts to trickle down through the wood chips, down through the surface. And the newspaper level, which has now got this weight of compost and wood chips on top, presses down on the grass and the weeds, and that creates a semi-permeable barrier. It's always wet. It starts to draw the moisture up through the ground. So that means that those weeds and the newspaper ultimately decompose, and that makes more compost. And the fact is that the ground is now covered in a layer. So when we go into a forest, what do we see? We can see the land next door on the farm or whatever, and we have a look at that, and it can be hard like iron. It's full of clay, it's very dry, but we walk into the forest straight away and we've got a covering. And we look at the way the leaves work with the land, and we start to grub underneath, and what have we got? Moisture. It's full of all sorts of creatures and microorganisms and stuff like that, and it's a very soft, rich environment. So keeping a skin on the ground is very important, and you can even use rocks for this because they create little areas of moisture underneath. So what can we use? We can use also straw, grass clippings, leaves, but wood chips are recommended as the best by Paul Gauci, the reason being that things like leaves and grass clippings tend to make quite a slippery, slimy surface, which is not quite so pleasant to work on. And the wood chips break down very, very quickly. What we don't use, though, is eucalyptus, sawdust or bark. They're not quite as effective. When they break down over time, then they have a longer term effect. But in the short term, these things are not overly beneficial and bioavailable. And eucalyptus has a sort of toxic effect on other plants in the ground. So very, very simple technique. You can't go far wrong with it. So what are the benefits? The benefits are that we've got this permanently moist ground that the worms can dig through, and they do. So the worms are doing the digging, thank you very much, and that means that my shovel and my fork are now kept in the garden shed. The rich organic nature of this soil forms a buffer, and what that means is you can grow acid crops right next to alkaline crops, and you don't even need to rotate them. You can just keep growing the same thing again and again and again if you want, because it's got bags of microorganisms, fungi, bacteria, organic compost, etc., minerals available in that soil. So the moisture means that the microorganisms thrive, and it also means that we have little or no watering. Excess water gets absorbed by the wood chips, and it gets released by the wood chips when the plants want it. So the watering that we do tends to be, we've got some seedlings or something like that for lettuces, a little bit of watering, help them start off, leave them alone. That's it. So we've cut back on the watering now as well, and that's also good for the planet. The weeding itself still has to be done, but there's less of it and it's much easier than a conventional garden, and we'll look at some pictures of that later on. So what happens is we re-add more wood chips over time and the soil conditions itself. What we're not doing though is we're not digging the wood chips into the ground. The reason for this is that wood chips they remove nitrogen from the soil when they decompose. So putting them on top, no problem. They're taking the nitrogen from the air, and then the actual components are just going into the soil. But if you were to dig, again, don't dig your wood chips into the soil, then they're going to start to steal nitrogen from that rich ground. So very good in terms of conditioning itself and managing water. And the result is low management, low energy, high yields and good quality crops. So here's what we're producing in 80 square metres. Carrots, parsnips, broccoli, runner beans, broad beans, peas, celery root, celery stick, beetroot, angelica, rhubarb, blackroot, onions, both red and white, chives, kohlrabi, cabbage, watermelons, pumpkins, peppers, dill, parsley, sweet corn, mangold, butternut squash, and spinach. So it's quite a rich and varied sort of plot that we've created. So, and there's me looking, I think, probably stunned. This is one of the first year's carrots. And I never expected things like that from the first year of this thing. But the big bonus for me was this was dug out of the ground after winter. So one of the mistakes we made was, again, we put all this down in June. The carrots were very, we put them, we sprinkled them on top. And then they had to fight their way down and all the rest of it. We gave them a difficult job. But come probably February or March this year, this was pulled out of the ground after going over winter. And it was probably the best carrot I've ever had. So that's my bonus. It's not necessarily about producing things that are huge, but getting things that taste absolutely incredible. That's what I'm about. Parsnips, again, probably the best I've ever tasted. If you like roast parsnips, great big fat roast parsnips, put in the oven with a Sunday roast, and the inside comes out like very, very soft, very sweet, very moist mashed potato, and the outside has that lovely sort of caramelized nature that it gets. So there's Amber. She's not looking impressed either, but there is the some of the mangold that we're collecting. So you're now getting an idea for the size, and it looks good. It definitely looks good. That's the rhubarb. That was transplanted last year, and the size of the leaves are about this across by this long. So that's done well as well. I don't think any of this is outrageously spectacular actually at the moment, but that's what we want to get. There's a cucumber from this year. That's a beetroot. As Thomas and Julia will confirm, the beetroot are about that size now. I think that is starting to get pretty impressive. But again, the thing about the beetroot is these are soft and tender and tasty, like little baby beetroot. And the way we do them is we peel them, or we boil them and then peel them, chop them up, and mix them actually with a spoonful of honey. It gives a nice sweet sort of glaze to them, so we can eat them hot or cold. There's a nettle. So now this is starting to show the difference between the plot and everywhere else in the garden. If I tried to do that anywhere else in the garden, it would not have that full set of roots on it. The land is so hard that I'd just be pulling out the top of the plant. And the same goes for the thistle. So we've got lots of issues with nettles and thistles and stuff like that. And what I'm anticipating is we're going to put more wood chips on the garden this year, and the soil will become in better and better and better condition. And as Paul Gauci shows on the Back to Eden film, what he does is he bends over and he reaches into the soil, and he reaches deep into the soil and he picks it up, and it's just like compost. It's rich and it's brown and it's just running through his hands. And you imagine then, if you want to do your weeding, that's easy. So back to that vision, that horror vision of mine of the black and white figures covered in grime and toiling in the fields all day. It looks like it's not going to happen. So the benefits are relatively easy weeding, no digging. little to no watering, no thinning of crops. So that means we can put all of these carrots and parsnips and things like that, especially with small seeds. And if you've got loose soil, they push apart. So they make their own space in the soil. So we don't need to go back and start to thin things out. And again, that will become better and better and easier to easier. I think probably you've got excellent yields compared to most gardens in year one alone. But I would say conservatively, at least they were certainly, anyone would say that they were good. And my father, who's a big critic, came along and took a look and went, those lettuces, they don't get any better than that. Pest resistance. Unfortunately, we're not talking about slugs here, but everything else seems to have good resistance. Frost resistance. No nitrogen tie-up, as I said. You can't overwater them if you want to water them, and living soil means no rotation. So at least in this little area of the garden, we're doing something to work with nature as much as possible and not doing the fighting of the land. A little tip for you on insect control. This is from Paul Gauci as well, which is he sprays his plants with garlic, chilies or jalapenos. He mixes them in a blender, he adds water, and he sprays them on the plants. Because apparently the little beetles and flies and stuff like that, they don't like hot vegetables. But the vegetables themselves don't have a problem with that. So we've got a little trick in the box, if you like, to deal with that, and it's no chemicals again. All winter crops we're looking at are beetroot, parsnips, kale, parsley and carrots. And another interesting fact is that well-insulated soft ground full of wood chips doesn't freeze. It doesn't freeze hard anyway and destroy the crops. It keeps the plants and the bacteria warm so they operate for longer, and the winter crops get better and better. So what are the special technologies that we're already starting to apply? One is the next one that Katia is going to talk about, which is called Agrifit or Ernasan. I can't remember which one is the name of the company and which one's the name of the product. But it's ultra-fine rock minerals, and either, if I'm really keen, I get up early in the morning, I mix a level tablespoonful with 5 litres of water. I pump the container and I spray the plants on top, but especially underneath the leaves. And I do that typically every couple of weeks. So I've not done it much this year. I've just been too busy with other stuff. But this is where it starts to get weird. When you look at a bunch of soldiers on parade and the sergeant calls them to attention, very suddenly they're like this. And I couldn't believe my eyes after I did the first spraying on this, and I had to get Sylvia up at an early hour in the morning to go, look at this. Can you see the difference in the plants after we've sprayed them? Yeah. Wow. I've never seen anything like that before. And so the plants are readily absorbing these rock minerals, and it seems to be having a great result on them. So if we had very dry soils, and we've done some planting around some borders of the garden this year, we did stick some charcoal in with some heaps of the wood chips and the compost, and we've been growing butternut squash and pumpkins and things like that as well. We've also got some Tesla spirals. We might try some orgonite, but I'm also thinking now about Yannick Van Doorn, whose work I'm going to cover later, who has like little capacitors made of beeswax and other stuff that he sticks in the ground. Whoa, this is really interesting stuff, and you'll be amazed at the photos I'm going to show you later. But the theory is that these little spirals of copper have a straight point that goes into the soil. They start to spiral out, they get wider and wider and wider, and then it returns to the middle and you've got a little spike at the top. And when you get into electroculture, what you find is that there's a difference of 300 to 350 hertz, I think it is, volts it is, from the ground to the air above it. So if we can somehow tap a tiny amount of that energy and put it into the soil, then what we're doing is, in a way, we're acting almost like the little tiny brother of lightning. And one example that I saw, I went to Bali a few years ago and I looked out from a cliff over this jungle, and the guy I was with pointed out this huge tree that towered over the rest of the jungle. I said, what's that? And he said, that's the world's biggest banyan tree. Okay. He said, yeah, it was struck by lightning. And since then, it's grown at a much faster rate than anything else in the forest, and that's why it's the world's biggest banyan tree. And my theory at the time was, okay, well, that's probably conducting nitrogen in the soil, and it probably was. But I wasn't aware then of the electrical energy system of plants as well, and the fact that they're acting as capacitors and batteries, and the way that they are connecting the ground to the air, and probably using that effect as well. And part of the rationale for this is that the really, really, really big trees, when you do the science on it by the theoretical physicists, they go, the transpiration of the water from the leaves at the top cannot account for the transport of the water and the minerals right from the bottom of the tree right the way up. There's not enough energy there. I'm not a theoretical physicist, but when a theoretical physicist tells me that they've done the maths on it, then I'm going, okay, something interesting happening here. So we've got the spirals, and we want to try ormus, which is fermented rock minerals. I saw a presentation by Ken Roller at the Global BEM conference a few months ago, and that sounded very interesting and exciting. We'll cover that later. I'm interested in upgrading the spirals, maybe having a different shape, maybe getting them printed by a 3D printer and coating them with GANs. See if we can get something, it'd be nice to get them printed in metal, copper, or a superconductive material to see if we can really bring a lot of energy to the ground. But, that's not for the moment, unfortunately. Water technologies, we want to bring some of them in as well, because we know that use less water, but when the water is used, it seems to stimulate more plant growth. So again, what I'm looking at is this stimulates more plant growth, that stimulates more plant growth. How many things that can we put together simply, cheaply, and easily to make a mega result? So I've already mentioned Yannick van Doorn's capacitors. We might use orgonite, and also people using sound frequencies to stimulate plant growth as well. Here's another simple technique. You've probably mostly heard of this, but you can get 20 or 30 pounds, which is in the region of 10 or 15 kilos per potato plant when you use this technique. And what you do is you just add more and more layers and more soil through the season. And what you're doing, of course, is you're saving the amount of ground that you're utilizing. Also, it becomes very easy to pick the potatoes, and you're getting mega yields. So if you're going to grow potatoes, then I'd rather make the boxes and know that I'm going to be saving my back some effort. Right, here they are, little bastards. Enemy action. That's the slugs. We live in slug central. So we live in fields surrounded by farmers who do all the bad stuff with agriculture. And, the result is that the slugs are, going through the fields of sweet corn going, this isn't very appetizing, hang on, what is that green oasis over there? And suddenly there's thousands of them, and, we've certainly spent an hour or more, some evenings earlier last year, with a big jar collecting slugs. And I don't like slugs. I don't like them eating my food. Sorry, but no, the broccoli's there for me. I don't want to find it all eaten by these little blighters. So we have a solution. This is the latest iteration. This is Star Trek slug control. Because, my time, I value my time. I'd rather put the time into making something like this, although it may make me seem completely mad. But we put the soil stuff down and the wood chips and everything. Then I put the wooden fence around the outside, and you may just be able to see two little wires close together near the top of the fence, and they run parallel around the fence. So the first iteration was plugging that into 9-volt batteries, and having the positive at the top and negative at the bottom, and the wires not touching. And what happens is the slugs wriggle over and they touch the second one, and then they're quite determined. They'll go back and they'll have a number of tries. That creates a number of issues, measuring the power of the batteries and all the rest of it. So the long and the short of it is that then eventually I tried a moped battery, and you've got to keep these wires both disconnected and keep the plant matter off them, I've learned. And then I don't want to have to keep checking the battery. And I don't want to have to keep topping up the battery. So the maintenance now is I unclip it, I top it up with distilled water. It's connected to a controller and a solar panel, and that's it. Now that to me is ideal. I can unclip the batteries in the winter or whatever, but I want something very, very low maintenance. So, sorry, I'm not Sepp Holzer. I'm not David Holmgren. We do want to build a pond in the garden, bring in the frogs and things like that, which will start to eat the slugs. But my methodology at the moment is save myself time, keep them out, and if they're in, we'll put things like orange skins in there from juice making. They love that. They get exported and they don't come back. And if we have a real problem, then a normal permaculture approach is to add I've forgotten the name of it now, but probably one of you knows the little things that are the parasites, nematodes, for the slugs. So we can sprinkle some nematodes inside the garden, and then, frankly, sorry, but the slugs are going to die. But it's either that or chasing them and getting upset with them and stuff like that. And, no. We just want to keep them outside. There's the Tesla spirals. As you can see, I tried my best. You're now seeing the limitations of my work as a handyman, and you can see the wires now at the top of the slug fence. But the theory's there, and all I can say is we haven't been able to test everything separately. But, we're getting some pretty interesting results, I think. I asked Goa Labau, the 3D designer from the Thrive movie, to see if he could design a Tesla coil to connect this and harness this energy from the air and help to drive it into the ground. And he came up with this, which is triple spirals. So the answer is we don't know yet. Does it work? Doesn't it work? Yannick Van Doorn's got some devices, but I want to try this. He's done a beautiful design. It looks like a piece of architecture or sculpture for the garden. It'd be lovely to get them 3D printed, ideally in copper, but if not, plastic and GANS coated, and we'll stick them in the garden, one at each corner, one in the middle, and we'll see if that has a beneficial effect. So we got ormus. What's ormus? It's organically rearranged microelements, or ORMI state materials. It's created with very, very fine rock materials, and you add effective microorganisms. And believe it or not, you can ferment the rock. So you add water, and you add molasses, which is black sugar syrup. And the microorganisms will help to break down the rock into even smaller particles. Why is this important? Well, the smaller the particles, the easier it is for the plants to take them up and incorporate them. And the reports from Ken Roller and others are that the results are fantastic with both the quality and the quantity of the crops, and again resistance to all sorts of pests. So the final secret seems to be to put this in a vat and to stir it to create a vortex. And ideally, if you're going to do that, to place some magnets around the point of implosion, and then you get an energetic effect on the micronized rock as well. And that is then sprayed onto the ground. So aquaponics, we covered this a little bit in an earlier talk, but here's some misconceptions that I think need to be addressed. One is plants need to rest at night. Well, there's mixed evidence from this, but let's look at how nature really works. In the UK, we tend to think that there's a night time, we go to bed, the plants must go to sleep, and then they wake up in the morning. And then you go and visit somewhere like Sweden, where it is virtually 24 hours a day daylight in the summer and a very short growing system. And the plants aren't going, you know what, I haven't had a sleep for weeks. They're going, whoa, this is summertime, and off we go. But there is evidence that different kinds of plants do have different kinds of reactions regarding their fruiting and flowering and things like that. So how we deal with the information, the sophistication of the information becomes important. It may be useful to turn down the lighting or dim the lighting or whatever at night for certain plant species to get certain effects. But what is necessary for plants is light. So we need to consider the evidence pretty carefully, but I've heard the plants need to rest at night a lot, and I've gone out at night and I don't see any pillows, I don't see any duvets, and I don't see any plants with their reading glasses on browsing through their books. So the other one is that the plants need the full spectrum of sunlight. Well, I was a photographer, and the spectrum of sunlight changes all the way through the day. Look at the dawn. It's red. You get that warm colour to the light. Look at the dusk. It's red. You've got a warm colour to the night. We know that the cameras are balanced to 6,500 Kelvin, which is mean noon midsummer daylight at Washington, D.C., apparently. They had to pick somewhere. Why they picked there, I don't know. And that's a blue area of spectrum. And the result is that a lot of the LED lights have a blue spectrum element and a red spectrum element. And the science has been done. These are the frequencies that operate with the plants, and they don't necessarily need other kinds of lighting. So this is efficient, this is science, and if they tell me that the red and the blue lights are the most effective ones for the plants, then I'll buy that. Another one is it's not as good as organic food. Really? Why? I don't see the connection there. If the plants are getting light, they're getting heat, an appropriate amount, they're getting water, they're getting nutrients, they're being given an optimal environment, then why should this be in any way inferior to organic, where there might be, droughts or floods or pests or all sorts of other issues? And it saves the land. If you've got a piece of toxic land, you've got to go through years and years and years before you can get an organic certificate for it. So I don't buy that. The next one is that it's complicated and takes a lot of management. No, from what I've been told, you can slap a 12-year-old child on the back and they can maintain an aquaponics system of quite a significant size with very, very little time and management. So that appeals to me. It doesn't mean that we can't grow things outside. It just means that I would exercise discernment. I'd be growing strawberries outside. I'd be growing probably potatoes and carrots and parsnips and kale outside, and fruits and things like that. But inside, I'd be doing the lettuces and tomatoes and all sorts of other stuff. So we need to make a decision about this. The next one is you need a lot of space. 9 square meters per person was the quote from I think it was Portable Farms in the United States, and when I asked them about it, they said, we're being very conservative. We would typically aim for 2 or 3 times that yield. Bang. Interesting. So we're realistically looking at probably more like 3 or 4 square meters per person for growing our tabletop vegetables, and that's without allowing for the special technologies that we can bring in. And the last one is plants need to struggle. Yeah, like people. We need a real good fight every day to get on. It makes us stronger, doesn't it? Is that right? No, it's cobblers, isn't it, really? Please. You give plants an optimal environment, okay, I'll take a bet. I'll take a bet with anyone on this, even the organic farmers who insist that everyone has to dig, and I will set my plants in an optimal environment, and I'll compare them, and we can send them off to a laboratory for nutritional and enzyme testing and everything else, and let's do the test. So I'm confident that this is, you give anything a better environment, and it is going to do better. That's real logic, I think. Justin Christofleau. Wow, this is a hero. This guy was doing this stuff in the 1920s, but electrical research on plants has been going on for a couple of 100 years. And here is his electroculture aerial, and the aerial is set off to the north, and we could probably use brushes from some kind of a thing, metal brushes here. So this is aligned to the north and to the south, and the wind goes through, and the electricity of floating air carried by the clouds is harnessed by this. Then we've got a thermoelectric pile, that's capturing some sun energy. We've got a voltaic pile capturing the action of the rain. We've got telluric currents, which is the land magnetism. And, okay, it's probably now starting to go over my head, but let's move to the next. It now gets applied to plants and trees and vines and stuff like this. And there's how he actually does the installation. So, and that's how it can be connected up to an isolated tree. That's a cabbage. Christofleau knew some stuff, didn't he? Now, that to me would be, okay, if they have competitions for this kind of stuff in England, all right? Now, that would be fun. But I live in the middle of a sort of agricultural community in Austria at the present time. And if they had competitions, then, this is one way of getting the attention of the farmers, isn't it? And why not? We're opening their mind to other stuff. But quite how we're going to deal with that in terms of cooking, I don't know. I guess we're just going to be planting less of them and taking a bit of a leaf at the time. And that's going to be dinner. And probably giving a lot away to other people or having them very, very small. But there's a cabbage. That's a field of potatoes grown to 30 to 35 potatoes per plant, weighing from half a kilo to a kilo each. So there we go. We're looking at around about 15 to 30 kilos per plant, and they're big potato plants. Those are peas. Christopher Lareau has by far and away beaten what we've done with our peas this year. I have to stick my hand in the air and say that. Those are big peas. Those are around about 3 meters. There's an old pear tree laden with fruit, and what it says is this tree is so old that before being rejuvenated by electroculture, it barely carried a few leaves. We've also got Dan Carlson, who uses frequency and birdsong. And Yannick Van Doorn talks about birdsong and these frequencies stimulating the seeding process and stuff like that. But, everything is energy. We're certainly dealing with nature. That's a function of energy. Everything is to do with frequencies. We have resonant supporting frequencies and we have counter frequencies. So it seems to make sense that birdsong and certain frequencies are going to be beneficial for the plants. He also uses it combined with a spray-on mineral compound. But Dan, the price, you really need to do something about the price on this stuff. It's too expensive. I don't think it's reasonable. I'm sure it is for commercial agriculture, but for normal people like me, then that starts to become a bit of a stretch. But it's he's got various types of waterproof systems, including ones connected up to solar panels and timers and stuff like that. But you're certainly talking about $600-800 or something like that for a system. Dan Winter's water imploder. This is used in with blooming the desert. We've covered that, but the key is that plants need less water and they grow more. And there's resilience to drought, frost, and pests. And what happens is the water goes through this container. It is spun in sacred geometry, specific natural spinning form, and there are a series of magnets go around that point of implosion. So we know from that implosion implies a vortex, a point of implosion, and putting energy there makes sense. Why? If we're putting energy into that point, then I think what we're doing is we are pushing things together, making them smaller. And when we look at the function of energy in nature, well, consider where the most energy in nature comes from. As we go to smaller and smaller particles, it's not a lump of coal, but it's an atom that causes a nuclear explosion. So we've got this strange inversion in nature of the smaller the thing that we are going for, then the more energy it has. So there seems to be a logical basis to that for me as well. Pete Adams does ozone tubes. That creates ozonated water, which can be used to remove chemical contaminants such as pesticides and herbicides. Excuse me. Yeah. Okay. Ozone. O3. Oxygen is used within our system to explode viruses effectively. It's carried around by the blood. So what happens, though, in an ozone water system is that the pesticides and herbicides are long chains of chemicals. Look at petrol. It's a carbohydrate. It's a hydrogen-carbon chain, a long one. Now, and we know it's very toxic, but if we break it down into carbon, that's not very toxic. We can take that for our stomach complaints and stuff like that. Hydrogen, that's in our water, that's in the air, etc. That's not a problem. So it's the way the chemicals are built into chains and combined that causes a problem. So the ozone technique breaks them down. So that means that we can use our well potentially surrounded by farmland and take out all of that chemical contamination. There's also a growth result in plants. It's got great drinking quality apparently, and water like that, interestingly enough, will act as an antibacterial and antiviral disinfectant. Why? It's carrying O3, it explodes them. Oops. Ormus, Kenrola, that's the orbitally rearranged monoatomic elements. It makes bioavailable minerals with a charge. So we've explained about the necessity to ferment them in a vortex. What's interesting to me is it provides a theory for many ancient techniques, including Steiner. So Steiner talked about using horns of cows and shells and things like that, and filling them with cow muck and arranging them in various patterns like spirals in the ground and burying them for a year. Okay, sounds like witchcraft, doesn't it? But now we've got a theory for this, which is that the shells and the horns and things like that are made of crystalline materials. They are in a sacred geometric shape. Connecting them together into a wider sacred geometry means that they can harness energy, and that energy can be directed into the compost material, the cow shit and stuff like that put inside these things, and help to break them down into a smaller form, and also fill them with a higher level of energy. So bang, we've now got the relationship of Ormus to Steiner techniques coming together. And that the result can be sprayed onto plants, poured onto the ground, etc. Hydroxy, HHO from water, so back to electrolysis of water, producing HHO or Brown's gas. The theory here is that it can release hydrogen in a readily usable form, and it can also be converted directly into energy by both plants and people. Again, there seems to be two forms of HHO at least. In fact, there's many forms, but there are basic principles. One is an implosion technique and one is an explosive technique. And somehow if we can use implosion with this and make the hydrogen smaller, then it will hold more energy. And we've heard of some very, very interesting results of using Brown's gas bubbled into the water of hydroponics and aquaponics systems and things like that. So now we start to consider how can we leverage these things by putting a number of things together. So HHO is generated by electrolysis. So now we're coming into some new theories of plant growth. The electrical conductivity of plants and trees, utilizing the differential between the ground and the air, and the use of super mineralization. And we've got the example of organic grapevines, which is used by the rock mineral that Katya is going to talk about, where they were talking about getting 5 or 6 years growth in only 2 years compared to the test batch of other organic grapevines, and getting grapes that taste better, yield more, and last significantly longer. Okay, so we've got the function of hydrogen as available energy as well, and we've got Ormus. So the potential is now, we've got statistics coming in to support all of these various things. The question is, what's our underlying theory, and how many of these things are actually doing the same thing, or how many are actually able to multiply the effect, like Dr. Irina's healing technologies, of producing mega results? Because Christopher Leroux wasn't necessarily aware of all of these techniques, but if we just consider what he was doing, then it'd be very interesting to make a grape this big, for example. I don't know how the supermarkets would react to that, but it might replace melons. So further resources for you, back to edenfilm.com. It's free, see the film. I don't think it's on YouTube, but that's back to the guy who was quoted at the start of the presentation, Paul Gauci. He's very religious, very nice guy. He's got his experience and he explains it very, very well, I think, and he's got all sorts of other tips and hints. Holzer Permaculture US and seppholzer.at, the hero, really, of permaculture. Freshandalive.com is the website of Ken Roller, who deals with Ormus and a lot more. Very, very knowledgeable guy. Lots of good stuff on YouTube. Sonic Bloom from Dan Carlson is the next one. Then we've got Yannick van Doorn's site, and a lot of interesting articles from Rex Research as well at the bottom. We've got more there. That's a long URL. I'm not going to write that one or spell that one out for you. And electricfertilizer.com as well. And then finally a permaculture link at the bottom. So here's a couple of quotes for you. Yannick van Doorn. This is not the full quote, but the results were amazing. The cabbages were 3 to 5 times bigger than usual, and the farmer was astonished. And delighted, I think. And Rumi, on a journey, never seek advice from those who've never left home. And that's the one that I'd play back to some of the old-fashioned organic diggers. We've got so much more we can do, permaculture and rock minerals and everything else. So thank you very much. Are there any questions?
With the permaculture, when you do you have to use seeds or do you have to use seedlings when you plant the plants?
We've almost all that we have done has been from the seeds.
Okay,
and
so
we
just put them on the soil and
put them in rows, or some of them need light actually to grow. And they used to just dropping on the surface. Other ones you may need to just
cover a bit.
It's a seed. It'll find its own way. A bit of water or whatever, no, we don't do much to it. But all we do is we support certain companies who have the heritage organic seeds. We don't have the hybridized stuff. We support those companies and their products because we want to have, proper stuff, not Franken tomatoes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Again, we need a few minutes break before Katja. Oh yeah.
Oh. If I could take literally 1 or 2 minutes, we'll get this recording and we'll splice it onto the end of the energy currency one. And I'll be very, very brief. So I was asked an important question yesterday, which is why connect currency to energy? And especially when so much of this conference has been about free energy, let's consider the impact of that on the world. We've got a yawning gulf between two very, very different paradigms. If everything is connected to energy, and we know that it is universally and financially and in every other way, then when energy is free, everything is probably going to be free. That is a very, very different paradigm from the one that we're in at the moment, where everything is about money. Now, my hypothesis is this: if we can connect the value of currency to energy, then free energy will eventually start to hit the consciousness. I don't think it's going to be like a switch. I think it's going to happen over a period of time. But eventually more and more people will know about it and have access to free energy, especially with open sourcing and stuff like that. And the hypothesis is this: as the appreciation takes place that energy is free, then the value of the currency is going to reduce as well, and they will both zero out at the same time. And that forms a bridge between this paradigm and the next one, not a gap or a potential collision point. It also means that we will need a second currency at some stage, and the thinking on that is this: as our community moves into abundance, we've now got a trust or another community organization which is starting to stack up euros or dollars or stuff like that. Why? We're saving a lot of money, we've got multiple income streams, and we are starting to flip around that flow. Why not connect that to a currency of saving? Why not connect to other communities and say, hey, we can create a currency of saving, and this will be linked to buying toxic land, like mining land or whatever, where we can use frequencies and bacteria and other things to remove the risk to the environment, to remove the arsenic, to remove the sulfides, to clean up the waterways, to clean up the land, and also probably in many cases make a profit extracting copper, silver, gold, etc. And why not also bring to consciousness not just the connection that it's our signature that makes the money, it's our energy symbolized in the money that runs the financial and the economic system, but also the act of saving is connected to saving the planet. And what will happen will be then that the land, which is a liability, will also rise in value. So just a follow-up to that question from yesterday.
Perfect. Thank you very much.